Let's do it. Let's do it. Broadcasting from around the world, you're listening to The First 100, a podcast on how founders acquired their first 100 paying customers. Here's your host, Hadi Radwan.
Good to have you on the show, Jenny. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Amazing. I'm excited about this. We shuffled a little bit the episode from before, but here we are today. Jenny, he is the co-founder of Ergion, which is a company that uses technology to fundamentally transform the residential construction sector by empowering both the customer and the local installers within the construction project. And you've raised to date around 53 million from notable investors such as Prism and DST. Jenny, welcome to the show. If you were to explain your company to an 8-year-old, just simplifying it, what's exactly Ergion doing to both the customer and the local installer?
So I have a 10-year-old. So it's a great question for me. The way I would explain it would be to give her an example. If I think about my daughter, I would say when I was 8 years old or when I was her age, if I wanted to talk to my grandparents who lived in another city, I would literally write letters. And I would wait almost a month for my letter to get to them, for them to write another letter, and it would come back to me. And now she talks to her grandparents pretty much anytime through a video call, just like what we're doing right now. And in a lot of ways, that's what Ergion is trying to do in the residential construction world. And actually, video is one of the tech components we do use, which is available today and wasn't always available, to make it easy, for anyone who wants to improve their home, to make that happen for them. And similarly for the people who have the skills to make that improvement, but to make that communication just so much easier, so much faster, so much smoother.
Thank you for sharing this simile. It's easy to understand it now. But you have been exposed to the construction industry since an early age, since your parents were civil engineers and they worked on the biggest dam in China. What were dinner topics like at your household?
Well, being Asian, and actually I just visited my family in China last week, it's very interesting to see the difference in Asian dinner topic versus US dinner topic. And one of the things we're always talking about in Asian culture is food. So that even though you're eating right now, you're talking about what are we going to eat tomorrow? What are we going to eat next week? What's a cool new restaurant that's open? So that was definitely a very big part of growing up. But of course, and my parents also talked about their work very naturally because they both worked in the same field. So they had a lot to communicate with each other. And we use a lot of words like concrete and water pressure and things like that at the dinner table, which is perhaps not as typical for that of a typical child. And I remember actually watching a video very young, and my parents were really excited because video recorders were not very common then, to show me this video of how a dam is built from scratch. And I was pretty young at the time, before I was 10.
Amazing. Your career is quite impressive because you worked at McKinsey, then you founded a few other companies, and then you're here. Take us back to the founding aha moment. How did you come up with the idea? Why do you think that idea needed a company like you to fix that problem?
I think to an extent, if I really think about it, you mentioned McKinsey, right? So a decade ago, I was still working at McKinsey. And I actually had this insight a decade ago. It was a very different context. I was working for an industrial company as a client, and I was spending a lot of time with their field tech force and looking for opportunities on how they can digitize it more, transform it operationally, find the efficiency. And one of the things I realized was they had this, aging population challenge where they have these highly skilled technicians, but they don't have enough of them to do the work. Yet these highly skilled technicians would drive up to 8 hours to a site to do troubleshooting in person. And I thought, oh my gosh, have you heard of this amazing thing called FaceTime? And they tried it. Like, this was really literally a decade ago. And they tried it and they said, oh, wow, I don't have to drive 8 hours. I mean, this there is someone on the other side who's, pretty knowledgeable. It's just I'm the senior technician, right? And I just need, through video, I can guide them through this. So that was perhaps one of the aha moments that made me realize so many more things could be done, especially in the world of, highly skilled technicians who work in the field, and we don't have enough of them in the US across so many industries. And construction is really where the shortage was the highest. So then I was really trying to hone in to find what is the angle to get into construction. And prior to this company, I was at another company where we were focusing on using technology to, empower homeowners, but more in the home services aspect. And we saw this opportunity to then bring the two sides together in this company.
Makes a lot of sense. So would you consider that your current company is a marketplace where you're matching or finding the customer and the local installer either through technology or matching them together? Is that a little bit the premise around it?
I think that's part of it, but we are deeper than a typical marketplace because from the perspective of the consumer, we truly guarantee the end outcome. So that's a little bit of my own learning as someone who did my own home renovation project and how painful it was. But also in seeing what you want as a homeowner, you want that person not to just say, okay, we do the matching and then good luck. It's like, no, I want you to make sure that you're warranting the outcome, right? That in a year from now, if something is not working, someone's going to come back and fix it.
Makes a lot of sense. So in an environment where there's a marketplace, it's a two-sided play, right? When you started the company, how would you decide about who to bring first to the platform? And what was the most challenging? Because if you have a lot of customers, all the local installers would love to work with you. But on the other side, if there's no customers, then the local installers will not be there. So how did you think about this early on?
Early on, we definitely felt it's exactly what you said. If you don't have enough customers, then people are just not even interested to talk with you. Like, you don't even have a project for me to do. So we definitely needed to first have some customers and then find installers. But to make that a simpler problem to start, we really just started here in Northern California and in a small area in Northern California because we knew if we are, people have a limited radius in which they're willing to work typically, right? So we would need to find many installers if we said, oh, let's just be nationwide from the beginning. So what they're really looking for is you have at least a couple projects and they're sufficiently close to each other that you can go and pitch just one installer.
What was your speech to these installers, which could be, in essence, not very tech savvy, and you're introducing something different than what they're accustomed to? What was your speech to them to join you?
It just has to be really simple. For them, it's our speech is like, hey, we have projects. This is how much we pay for each of these projects. Are you interested in doing them? Right. That's it. Nothing more at the beginning. And then over time, of course, we're pitching things like we can provide you stability of income. You can grow with us. You can grow your business, be a more successful business owner. But at first, to just hook them and get them interested, we're like, these are real projects. People have signed. Do you have time to build them? That's it.
It's an easy sell when the projects are there. So if we go back to the projects, what were your early acquisition strategies? How did you attract projects to come on your platform?
At the very beginning, we definitely start with paid channels. And actually, I think a lot of founders shy away and say, I need to be my own brand from day one. I need to have Google and Facebook and SEO. But all those things take time to scale. Whereas in the home improvement industry, there are already a number of established players, right, that have built their brand over a long period of time here in the US. So we purchased leads from them to get started. It was the fastest way to know how many leads we can get, at what price, exactly in the zip codes we wanted them, etc., and allowed us to be very targeted very quickly.
And how would you, in that case, avoid being the middleman? Because the these companies can go directly to the installer. What was your edge here and what was your value proposition?
For those companies, what they would be selling to the installer is, I am asking you to pay me for the lead. Whereas our value prop is, I am going to pay you to build a project.
Makes a lot of sense. You've raised 53 million, right? And I've read somewhere that a lot of these journalists are surprised that a fencing company has raised 53 million. Walk us through your thought process. What's behind all of this so that you need so much funding to grow and capture a market share?
It's really comes down to investing in the tech platform and the R&D, right? What's different between us and the local competition? Fundamentally, it's the tech. So even though it may sound like, oh, fences are so simple, right, in the world of construction, but actually it's not nearly as simple if you're truly owning the end-to-end process. So what does that mean? That means if you were our customer today, you come, you find us on the website, right? You can self-book an appointment. We would enter a call like this. And during this call, I can show you live different designs. It gets automatically rendered. I measure your fence for again live in the same video call. I'm able to give you an instant price, right? But what's behind that? That means I need to build an AI rules engine to produce the actual material spec based on the build, to produce the labor steps, to calculate therefore an accurate cost, accurate pricing. And there's high variability from city to city across the nation. I'm able to do the 3D visualization automatically. There's a lot of workflow automation that happens end to end. I have an app for the installer. So frankly, sometimes, when you look at it, there are many software businesses that just do one of the pieces, right, that we're talking about. So we actually have to build pretty significant tech. And that's one part of it. And the other part is, of course, you asked me earlier, right? How do we get started in the market? Like many places, there is absolutely a launch cost to get started in the market. And then in the first phase, you're doing paid leads. And then through that, you give people a great customer experience. Our customer NPS is in the 70s versus 0 is what's sort of typical in this industry. And we earn great reviews, and that helps us build our organic brand locally and the organic leads, right? But it's definitely a phased approach. So it does require investment upfront.
Amazing. Thank you for clarifying this. This is your second startup, I guess, after Easy Home. And you have a playbook now in place. But as you're starting, what has been the most challenging part when it comes to building this startup?
For me personally, this is, even though I got amazing experience at Easy Home, learning from two really seasoned founders and having a wonderful team, it's my first time being the founder. And I thought, oh, it's not so different being a CEO versus being a founder CEO. Turns out it still feels very different to be a founder. Particularly, I think some of the things that was perhaps the hardest for me is this whole concept of fundraising that we're just talking about. It felt so foreign to me. Like I've never borrowed money from anyone. I don't borrow money even from my friends or family. And suddenly I have to go out there, ask investors to believe in something that's still a faraway future idea, right? And say, hey, do you believe in this concept? Do you believe in us as a company for this future payback? That was very, very foreign to me. I think also a very difficult experience in that it's much more of a individual. I felt the pressure was completely on me versus in all other aspects of my work. I'm part of a team. We're working on it much more together.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing this. One of the most critical things when building a startup is finding the right co-founder. And yourself, you have an impressive CV. You're a PhD, you're a licensed contractor, you're from McKinsey, you've worked at a previous startup, and your co-founder is also someone very important in that industry. He has started a couple of companies, I think Upwork, which was IPO'd, Intact, which was sold to Sage, and many more. What do you think is the key criteria for two co-founders to fit together?
I think the most important thing is, like any long-term, right, partnership or etc., you need to have aligned vision and values. So, because, the startup journey is certainly full of ups and downs, lots of surprises along the way. You can't anticipate what might happen. So it's so critical, therefore, for you to know that you're working towards the same long-term goal, because that's what's going to get you through the hard times. And similarly, when you're dealing with difficult decisions, and there are always plenty of those, having aligned values is so important for you to get through them. And I definitely credit my co-founder for having a lot of experience working with different co-founders. One of the things we actually, this more tactical side, right, is it's really important to kind of decide ahead of time, what are the decisions each of you is primary on. So you won't agree on everything. You might agree on 99%, but for that 1% you don't agree on, who gets the final say in what situation? And to think about that ahead.
Makes a lot of sense. Two follow-up questions, which I think are very relevant to a lot of startups, co-founder coming together is, one, how do I split equity? Is there any criteria I would look at? The simple one is 50-50 if it's true, but sometimes it's not the case.
Yeah.
And the second question is, how would you look at titles? Like, who would be in that case the CEO? Or we've seen a lot, like there's co-CEO. Does that actually coexist when you are making specific big decisions? What's your take on this?
It's actually pretty interesting. So we have chosen to go 50-50, which is actually not the norm. You would think it is, but it's actually absolutely not the norm. In chatting with investors, right, anecdotally, they would say it's maybe 5-10% of the case people go 50-50. Why? It is because of the decision-making issue. So I think we were able to do this. It feels the most fair and equitable. You believe the other person brings very different things to the table. It's hard to evaluate at the beginning. It's almost impossible. But we were able to do this, I think, because we had already talked through the decision making. I think often this doesn't go as smoothly when people haven't fully thought that through. I think what's more typical that I have seen is something like a 60-40 split between the person that is able to do the fundraising through their connections, at least for the initial rounds. That's what I've seen as a bit more typical, kind of a 60-40 split. Or, in the case of multiple founders, often people want to have a main founder, which is typically the CEO, that has, let's say, something in the 50-60% range, and then equal split between the rest. Those are the most common models I have seen personally, speaking with other founders. On your second question around titles, right? I think it is, yes, I have seen some cases of co-CEOs, and it's quite rare. It's potentially workable, but I do think it is more confusing. There's more potential for confusion for the rest of the org versus having clearer titles and clearer scope. So in our case, by having a more traditional CEO versus CTO title, I do think it's clearer. People understand everything, engineering, product, everything tech is under my co-founder. The business aspects are under me for the most part, right? We make many of the strategic decisions, cross-functional decisions together, but it also makes it clearer for the rest of the company what they'll do. And of course, you're a founder, so you do whatever is needed, and we help each other with many, many things. My co-founder does many things outside of being the CTO, but still, it just gives more clarity for the organization.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you for sharing your insights. You believe that amazing companies start with amazing people, and you're also an all-remote company with more than 350 people coming from all over the world. First, why do you believe that remote working works, and how did you actually manage to adopt a framework that makes the team very productive in different time zones?
So on the first part, it was a bit of a learning from the previous company. We decided to be all remote from day one. The previous company, we actually had two models. We had a headquarter office in California, and we had a remote team for majority of the functions, but still. But I think with that kind of management, it was actually harder. So when we decided to be all remote in the long term does have certain benefits, particularly in terms of long-term scalability, because you're able to access a much more diverse pool of talent. Like, not everyone's willing to physically move to wherever your headquarters happens to be. And it can be a long-term scalability and competitive advantage. We also do believe by having that geodiversity, we have team members in 49 countries, which is unusual even amongst remote companies, because that brings high diversity of thought into the company. And we also kind of learned that, let's say you already hired 20 people in one company in only one location, nobody from a second country really wants to join, because then they're like, oh, I'm going to be the one person joining a team that's all from country X, right? So we try to actually build, I believe even in year one, we had people in over 20 countries. And then when people see that, then they say, oh, okay, like this company's going to welcome me no matter where I'm from. And so that's kind of that's kind of the first part of your question, right? And then on the second part of the question of like how to make it work and how to make it productive, I think there are definitely, it's really just being really thoughtful early on. I mean, we are fortunate to have a lot of lessons from our previous company. And of course, my co-founder's experience building Upwork is quite unique. But especially time zones is for sure one of the hardest challenges, right? And what we really do is be really thoughtful about having these limited hours where we expect kind of company-wide meetings to be. So it's really just a couple of hours a day. And try to pick them, they're very early for me because I'm in Pacific time. And I'm really almost the latest in the company. And everyone else is earlier. And by having these like very limited hours, that means these are the only times where you need to be available for meetings. And then outside of that, really make synchronous and asynchronous communications very effective. So what does that mean? Like, it means that we record all our meetings and we have meeting notes for any important meetings. So anyone can catch up. We have a really robust internal help page so that people can easily access information at any time. We have a lot of data transparency. Everyone can see everything, right? So all those sort of things, which does require a lot of thought early on, does help make it work as well. And being really think about like every single thing you do in person and how would you translate it in a remote environment, like onboarding. We have boot camps that go for up to a month, depending on the role, with a lot of sessions, right? And it's a combination of video-based learning and live Q&A. We have mock calls. Like we do everything that people would perhaps implicitly learn by sitting next to someone, but we do it explicitly as an example.
Thank you for sharing this. This is very helpful. We are a fully remote company as well, and we're in different time zones, so we do understand the challenges that comes with it. But I think the key fact is if you build the right culture and you have the right people with the right attitudes, you entrust them to actually work in a system that, as you said, will function by itself automatically. And I think the flexibility and the fluidity of being able to work while at home gives you a lot of freedom, right? Freedom from moving and wasting time on the street. But more importantly, right, you have more time with your family, which is for a lot of people. For us, for example, in the organization, we had more people that are family oriented joining because that model worked for them much more than single people.
Absolutely. We definitely hear from people who are perhaps it would have been difficult for them to participate in the workforce in a normal way. Some of our most interesting examples is, let's say, both the husband and wife work for us, and then they have alternate the childcare. So it's like very extreme. But many cases, they're people talk about, they're saving up to 3 hours a day in commuting. It makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for sharing this. What's the principle that you live by that has served you well in your journey?
It's one of our company values, actually, which is to invest in people. And it started for me because I always loved learning. And personal growth was something very important to me personally, even as, a child and then later on as well. But then I found, as I became a bit more further along in my career and I was given the opportunity to mentor others, how much fulfillment I found through that personally. And I think in the end, right, humans are the most precious capital. Even when I think about what we're trying to do in Ergion is to solve a human capital challenge of there are not enough skilled contractors. People are always talking about they can't find them. And how can we allow them to do the things they're the best at that they spend years building, towards. Right? So that's one facet of investing in people. But of course, more broadly, it's something that I just get a lot of personal fulfillment from. But I also think many people are fulfilled through growth as well. So it's very exciting to see.
Amazing. Jenny, I've started a new section in this podcast where I would ask the guest to share with us a problem that they're having or a question that they need someone to answer or an advice. And we take that question and we give it to the next guest so that they can share with the advice. So do you have a question or a business problem that's pondering or on your mind that you need advice in?
Yes. So something I've been thinking about is with AI, all these different AI tools that we have now. Everyone's talking about how to deploy them in different teams. And of course, we're doing that as well. But the next level implication, which is the first order is let's deploy them. Let's take away administrative work. Let's make some of the things that was taking a lot of manual time, make that go away. But after you do that, what do you need to change in terms of how you manage people? Because now these people are no longer doing administrative work. They have a lot more time to focus on high impact work. But then do you as a manager need different skills than what you had before in order to manage a different workforce? And I have not solved this. So I would love to get help on this.
We'll put that as a question. Let's see who the next guest is, because it's going to be a surprise for them. And once we have the answer, we will let you know to see if someone cracked this. One last question, Jenny. What's next?
For us, as we mentioned earlier, right, we have focused a lot on first doing fences and then becoming a national company in fences. And really, what's next is how to transition from being a company to the consumer, we're a fence company, and to becoming an outdoor living company, really encompassing many more aspects of the yard. And then really, the whole home.
Amazing. We wish you the best of luck. 2 more questions. Where can people reach you and are you hiring?
People can reach me on LinkedIn. That's perhaps the easiest. That's how you found me, right? Which is wonderful. And yes, we are hiring.
Amazing. We'll put a link to the career page and hopefully you can find the right people. We wish you the best of luck. Thank you for joining, Jenny.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to the First 100. We hope it inspired you in your journey. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe to our podcast on Apple iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify, and share it with a friend starting their entrepreneurship journey. Leave us a 5-star review. Your support will help spread our podcast to more viewers.